Hello. My name is Boozy ASMR, and today we're going to be doing another reading from False Choices, the Faux Feminism of Hillary Rodham Clinton. So, today we're going to read Chapter 10, Hillary Screws Sex Workers, by Margaret Corbett. So, in U.S. politics, debate on the nature of sex work and the laws around it is rare, in contrast to the United Kingdom, where sex workers' rights advocates and active sex workers speak for decriminalization at the highest levels of politics and in the national press. The English Collective of Prostitutes has developed a pledge supporting the decriminalization of sex work that politicians and groups can sign. It has gained support among members of parliament across party lines. Its most prominent and vocal supporters are Socialist Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn and his shadow chancellor John McDonnell, MP. While Labour is divided, the Liberal Democrats and Greens officially support decriminalization. But in the U.S., decriminalizing sex work almost never appears in those perennial lists of signature issues. Gun control, abortion, taxes, immigration, and so on, that newspapers put to candidates each election season. In the United States, laws surrounding sex work are determined at the state level, so the legal status of sex work is rarely an issue in a presidential campaign. There's also an even more important cultural reason for the silence. In the U.S., where selling sex is illegal in every state except Nevada, a politician advocating clearly for the decriminalization of sex work would risk losing support. Because in the American political imagination, a sex worker can only be either a criminal or a victim. If any politician were to speak out on behalf of sex workers, it would be political suicide, says Bella Robinson, the Rhode Island director of the sex workers' rights activist group Coyote. The trafficking narrative has misled politicians, and prostitution has always been highly stigmatized in the U.S. It is easier for them to keep on course with policies that are failing, and the outright lie to the media about women being rescued when women are being arrested and not even offered any real services like housing, she says. Still, a small city, Nevada paper in a county with its own legalized regulated sex work did ask Hillary Clinton a straight question about sex work 8 years ago. During her first presidential campaign, she offered her clearest opinion on sex work to date. I do not approve of legalized prostitution or any kind of prostitution. It is something that I personally believe is demeaning to women. I have worked against it, and I have certainly taken a strong stand against what happens in many parts of the world where young girls and women are forced into prostitution against their wills. I understand Nevada as a regulated system, and it is within the authority of the state. So that is not a federal issue that we will have any role to play in when I am president. But I would obviously speak out against prostitution and try to persuade women that it is not, even in a regulated system, necessarily a good way to try to make a living. Let's try to find other jobs that can be there for women who are looking for a good way to support themselves and their families. Clinton has rarely spoken so bluntly as she did in 2007 about voluntary sex work. Like many politicians, she has tended to conflate voluntary and coerced sex work under the label of trafficking. And trafficking is an issue that Hillary Clinton has made central to her career. In doing so, she has, despite her oft-touted feminism, pursued policies that hurt girls and women. Anyone who loves justice opposes people being forced to do sex work as a matter of basic principle. That's why in today's media landscape, fighting traffickers or combating modern slavery is as uncontroversially lauded as fighting cancer, with an extra pop, feminist, multiculturalist, global, soft power filling. The notion of trafficking itself, however, is deeply problematic. Trying to get some page turn sounds in here as well. As Laura Augustin explains in her book, Sex at the Margins, trafficking is a word created expressly to attach a criminal label to migratory and economic behavior. There is no scientific standard for the term. Some projects attempting to quantify victims count all migrants who sell sex. Others consider anyone who agrees to denounce a trafficker according to local law. Others count everyone who gives money to a boyfriend, and yet others include all illegal sex workers. Victims may be tallied only in countries of origin or only in destinations or in both. Studies may include transit countries or not. Attempts at quantification are made more unreliable, moreover, because most segments of the sex sector are not recognized by governments, which means that there can be no proper counting of sex workers as a category either. I'm really enjoying this. It's JK's Farmhouse Ciders, Honey Crisp Haze. Anyways, far from liberating slaves, global efforts to combat the shibboleth of trafficking, efforts that work in concert with criminalization, mean that sex workers face violence, violations, stigma, poverty, and death at the hands of police, rescuers, or predators pretending to be clients. In the United States, recent campaigns against trafficking conducted by federal law enforcement have overwhelmingly caught independent sex workers and undocumented immigrants who were performing sex work voluntarily, disproportionately affecting the most marginalized sex workers, including people of color, trans people, single parents, and those with previous criminal convictions. These crusades against trafficking leave sex workers even less able to seek help from law enforcement when they actually need it. For instance, if they face coercion or wish to report underage sex work. Together, we must implement a comprehensive approach that both confronts criminals and cares for survivors. exhorted Secretary Clinton in an address to a 2009 Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe conference on preventing trafficking. Though it sounds progressive on its surface, this statement's conflation of the complex issues around work and migration into only two categories, criminals and survivors, tells us a great deal about Clinton's views on sex work. In her work as First Lady, as a New York Senator, and as Secretary of State, Clinton has campaigned vocally against trafficking and has supported organizations that have been shown to imprison, abuse sex workers. Robin D., writing at the first-class sex worker blog, Tits and Sass, summed up her role. Hillary Clinton is not responsible for the terrible policies of the Bush administration, but she is responsible for falling in lockstep with those policies during her tenure as Secretary of State under the Obama administration. The State Department manages the Trafficking in Persons, TIP, office, which ranks countries based on performance in this area and in an annual report. When Cambodia criminalized prostitution, setting up diversion programs that threw sex workers into rehabilitation centers where they were subject to rape and violence, Clinton's state awarded it an improved ranking. Countries can face sanctions and lose various kinds of aid from the United States if their TIP ratings are poor. Criminalization led to rescue organizations privately funded largely by Christian organizations participating in brutal street and brothel raids alongside Cambodian police. Clinton maintained a close relationship with AFESIP, the Cambodian rescue organization led by Somali Mam, who was later discredited by Newsweek reporters, as well as by a law firm hired by her own foundation for fabricating her own story and stories of the women and girls being helped by her organization. Mam later insisted that she, quote, didn't lie. Brought into the spotlight, AFESIP was also revealed to be holding women and girls against their will. Clinton served on the Global Advisory Board of the Somali Mam Foundation, which funded rescue groups worldwide until its closure in 2014. The TIP report is only one of the tactics the State Department uses to further criminalize sex work. State also administers many millions of dollars in global aid and development funds in a little-noticed 2008 legislative codicil to its massive global anti-AIDS funding campaign. The U.S. Agency for International Development denied funding to any organization that did not explicitly oppose prostitution. This was only overturned by the Supreme Court in 2014 by a case brought by organizations that refused to disavow the sex workers that they helped. Global public health bodies and human rights organizations from Amnesty International to UNAIDS to Human Rights Watch have condemned the criminalization of sex work in all its forms. Amnesty International's June 2015 policy statement in support of full decriminalization has sparked a furious worldwide debate, in which the lives of sex workers under criminalization, plagued with violence, stigma, poverty, and marginalization, have come into the foreground. Sex workers' voices are being heard in the national press and broadcast media, in countries like Britain, Ireland, Australia, France, Spain, and even the Ukraine. But in the United States, there is no national debate where sex workers have a place at the table. By helping to shape the American narrative around sex work, obscuring us as either criminals or survivors, Hillary Clinton has helped to keep us invisible, and she must like it that way. Clinton's State Department funded American rescue industry groups, largely Christian and mostly led by white men, who led rescue operations abroad and work with law enforcement at home. These groups rarely offer concrete services like housing, medical care, or food aid to the sex workers they, quote, rescue. Polaris Project, one group funded by the state, runs a trafficking hotline and purports to help victims. But when Bella Robinson tried to contact Polaris to seek assistance for a coerced sex worker, she found little practical help. The U.S. is funding trafficking NGOs at $686 million a year, and most of the money goes to create awareness on sex trafficking, and the rest of the money funneled into those organizations goes to pay their board members, many who make six-figure salaries, says Robinson. When I called Polaris, they said they don't investigate anything. All they do is relay tips to the local police. I said, can't people just dial 911 and we can save the $3 to $7 million a year you get in federal funding? They admitted they did not have any direct services, so all they do is refer victims to public shelters. A person can dial 211 and get a list of the same fake services. We cannot expect a President Clinton to change her mind on the nature of sex work, even if she is confronted with the impartial research of Amnesty International or the bare statistics on the failure and unconstitutional inhumanity of Operation Cross Country. She is not someone who lacks facts. Of course, Hillary Clinton is a product of her environment in an American political and public atmosphere so dominated by the religious right. There will be no Jeremy Corbyn for the American sex worker. She has swallowed the false paradigm of rescue whole. It is an integral part of who she is and the system of state power that she represents. It is unsurprising that a candidate who believes that that sex workers are victims to be rescued, criminals to be prosecuted, or survivors to be purified, also believes that the solution to the humanitarian crisis of Syrian refugees in 2015 and the plan for their rescue should be to bomb their country into dust. There will always be a few harboring illusions about her, but the only sex workers publicly supporting Clinton are the hookers for Hillary, sex workers touring at Dennis Hoff's legal Nevada Moonlight Bunny Ranch, who say they support Hillary because she's for affordable health care. And Obama's Affordable Care Act has let the independent contractors legally selling sex at the ranch purchase health insurance. But the Bunny's endorsement page says nothing about the broader decriminalization of sex work or Clinton's position on the matter. Because the hookers for Hillary live and work in Nevada, where sex work is legal in some counties, they enjoy a freedom that their candidate opposes. The best way to ensure safe, legal, and ethical sex work is decriminalization, as in New Zealand, where sex work is lightly regulated and sex workers enjoy the same protections for health, safety, and the right to organize as workers as in other industries do. But how can we achieve this status in the rest of the United States if not through electoral politics? Many sex workers believe the answer lies in the courts. Tara Burns writes, like we saw recently in the Supreme Court decision to allow gay marriage, the courts where minority peoples most often see our rights affirmed. The Supreme Court's job is not to act as a moral arbiter or to interpret the will of the people. It's to interpret the law, beginning with the Constitution. LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people are being denied their constitutional right to equal protection under the law. Now LGBT people are not being denied their right to equal protection under marriage laws, except for by Kim Davis. Sex workers and our clients are currently being denied access to several of our constitutional rights. These include privacy, equal protection under the law, and due process. What is needed is a finding by the Supreme Court and or each state's Supreme Court. That's how it was done in Rhode Island. That states are violating our constitutional rights with the prostitution laws. The Erotic Service Provider Legal, Educational, and Research Project, a sex worker group in California, is currently waging a lawsuit to make this approach a reality. Their case, which sex workers and supporters have supported financially, challenges the criminalization of sex work on the basis that it violates the constitutional right of freedom with association. Freedom of association as well. Legal challenges like these, and not electoral politics, are the best chance for sex workers in the United States to win the right to work in safety and peace. But it's still important for feminists to oppose candidates who oppose justice for this embattled group of mostly women workers. And Hillary Clinton is such a candidate. I understand the yearning for a woman president. I understand the hope that Clinton could somehow make a difference toward liberation. But without a frank reevaluation of her position on sex work, it is impossible for her to call herself a feminist as that term is understood today. So that's it for chapter 10. I hope this video relaxed you a bit. Maybe gave you some information you didn't already know. I hope to do this again soon. So, with that said, this is Boozy doing This is Boozy ASMR.